On special segment tonight, the new Payola, a sour note that is tainting the rock music business once again. It was back in the 1950s that Payola became a way of life in this industry. Record companies and promoters paying off disc jockeys to plug new releases and to boost sales. Today, the practice appears to be back, with a group of independent promoters playing a major role. And federal authorities are investigating a possible mafia connection. NBC's investigative reporter Brian Ross has additional details.
This block on First Avenue on the Lower East Side of New York is a stronghold of the Gambino Mafia family. According to the FBI and New York City Police, the Mafia capo who runs things on this block and in places far from this block is Joseph Armone, the man with the glasses, a convicted heroin dealer who on most days can be found conducting mob business at a back table in this pastry shop. For months now, the activities of Armone and others have been watched closely by the FBI and police as far away as Los Angeles, as part of an investigation of corrupt practices in the rock music business and what appears to be the reemergence of payola at rock music radio stations.
Hail, hail, rock and roll!
This was the Waldorf Astoria last month at a black tie celebrity dinner to honor some of the early stars of rock and roll. And among the guests, two of the most powerful and feared men in the rock music business. Joseph Isgro, who authorities say has described Mafia capo Armone as his partner, and Isgro's close associate, Fred DeCipio, who rarely does business without his associate, Mike, by his side. DeCipio and Isgro, each with his own company, are top men in what is called the network. About 30 men, many at this dinner, all known as independent record promoters, who industry executives say are getting millions of dollars a year from record companies to make sure that certain new songs become hits on certain rock music radio stations.
South Florida's hit music station.
And how some independent promoters go about their business, how they get records on the air, is now the scandal of the industry. Don Cox of Miami, one of the top disc jockeys in the country, says some promoters will do almost anything to get their records played and earn their big fees from the record companies.
Well, do you know how much money you make on having a hit record in this country?
Cox, who's had a drug problem, says he's had to turn away promoters who have offered him cash and cocaine.
You would take this ounce and going home of cocaine. A couple $1,000s. Here, you go take, you know, we can get more, you take this, and I'll give you a call Tuesday.
And what happens Tuesday?
They call you and go, how was that? By the way, I got this record I want you to hear. Now, if you take it, you got to answer the phone.
But they cozy up and they corrupt.
It's their job.
Cox on the radio.
Cox says at his station, the music staff picks which records to play based on the music.
Miami Tango is fun.
But disc jockeys and program directors elsewhere, who said they were afraid to go on camera, tell the same story Cox does about payoffs of cash, cars, expensive watches, drugs, and nights with women sent over by the promoters. Another side of the Payola scandal, according to industry executives, is suspected fraud involving the weekly Top 40 hits charts, which determine more than anything what's played on the radio in this country.
Okay, what was number 14?
This chart, published by the trade newspaper Radio and Record, is based on calls from 250 leading rock radio stations, reporting what songs they're playing. Authoritative industry sources say independent promoters have been getting certain radio stations to make phony reports, getting records not doing so well, not even getting played, getting those records on the Top 40 chart.
It's a serious thing.
Ken Barnes, the paper's editor, says about 20 radio stations were put on notice for making suspected phony reports, and 2 have been referred to federal authorities.
We're a trade paper. We can't be a cop. We can't really police what goes on at radio stations.
By industry estimates, DeCipio, on the East Coast, is sometimes paid as much as $150,000 by a record company for handling just one record. DeCipio would not talk to NBC News for this story. And on the West Coast, Isgro has become one of the wealthiest men in the music business, driving around in his Rolls-Royce, always accompanied by at least one bodyguard. Isgro would not talk to NBC News for this story. Isgro, shown here with a record company executive, is well known in the music business, and so is his bodyguard. But of 10 record company presidents contacted by NBC News, including the heads of such major labels as CBS, Warner's, RCA, MCA, none would agree to talk on camera about Isgro or DeCipio or the network of independent promoters, some saying they feared repercussions. Off camera, one company president said, "You just can't be in business without them." A second company president said, "It's obvious what's going on." According to figures provided to NBC News by industry sources, record companies pay independent promoters, many with mafia connections, almost $80 million a year. $80 million. And with this has come a climate of fear in the rock music business. Last year, Jay McDaniel says he was threatened by a big promoter when he tried to start a record promotion business, saying publicly he wasn't going to use Payola.
Were there threats of violence against you?
Yes.
What was said to you?
It basically came out that I could have my face rearranged.
Just how important the rock music business is to the mafia became clear last month at this New York City hotel. Joseph Armone, the man from the pastry shop, arranged an unusual meeting with the top 3 men in the Gambino mafia family, including the Gambino family boss, John Gotti. In the view of the FBI, a mob summit meeting. Also observed here, Joseph Isgro, who authorities say meets frequently with Armone and other gangsters, and Fred DeCipio, who according to his lawyer has never met Gotti, has met Armone only twice, and has no business relationship with mobsters.
Long live rock and roll!
1 hour after meeting top people in the American mafia, Isgro and DeCipio were at the Waldorf, taking their places among the top people in the American music business. Brian Ross, NBC News, New York.
Brought new arrest and new charges of racketeering in the American record business. In a series of reports on this program, NBC investigative reporter Brian Ross has detailed several links between the mob and the songs that make the charts. And tonight, Ross has more.
This is the man federal authorities describe as the godfather of the American music business, Morris Levy, in the custody of FBI agents after his arrest just after 7 this morning at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Boston. Levy, the president of Roulette Records, is little known outside the music business, but federal authorities say Levy is as powerful as any big record company president, using his ties with organized crime to control record companies, record stores, and big-name performers. Also arrested along with Levy this morning were 21 others in Florida, New York, and New Jersey, indicted by a federal grand jury in Newark on racketeering and extortion charges, accused of using violence to get their way in the gambling business, the narcotics business, and the music business. United States Attorney Thomas Grealish.
A MAC 11 machine gun with a silencer is not used for target shooting.
The New Jersey mob investigation began more than 3 years ago with a man identified by federal and state authorities as a mafia boss, Gaetano Vastola, known on the streets of New Jersey and in the recording studios of Hollywood as Corky. By following Vastola and tapping his phone, federal agents were led to Morris Levy, to New York talent agencies, and finally to Hollywood, to the corporate headquarters of the huge entertainment conglomerate MCA, and what authorities describe as some suspicious business deals at MCA Records. The president of MCA Records, Irving Azoff, said earlier this year that his company was the victim of the mob and that MCA had done nothing wrong. But somehow, according to federal authorities, millions of MCA records by Neil Diamond, Elton John, and the rock group The Who and others ended up in the hands of mob front record companies, which were going to sell the records at huge profits to record stores.
The mob showed up. The enforcers came down.
Dennis Eisman is the lawyer for a man who ran one of the mob front companies and is now a protected federal witness in the case. Eisman says his client was beaten up by the mob when he refused to pay for a large shipment of MCA records.
I think it was to show him that if he didn't pay, he was going to get hurt, maybe hurt worse. I'm not sure if they intended to break his jaw and fracture some bones in his face. I think it was just to show him that he couldn't not pay.
And there has been other violence in the case. Earlier this year, a New York City policeman was murdered while following one of the men involved in the MCA deal, who is expected to be indicted soon by another grand jury. This indictment is the work of one of 5 grand juries now investigating organized crime in the music business. Federal sources say a grand jury in Los Angeles is investigating the role of top MCA executives in all this. Other grand juries in Los Angeles, Cleveland, Philadelphia, and New York are investigating allegations of payola, the use of cash, cocaine, prostitutes, and some mob-controlled promoters to get songs played on the radio. Law enforcement authorities say what's at stake in all these investigations is the mob's stronghold in a business that earns $4 billion a year. Brian Ross, NBC News, Newark, New Jersey.